Hey, everybody, welcome to the program, WRSA Radio. I'm your host, G1. As always, I hope you're having a good week. It's been another fun one politically. We've had more Doge revelations, more appointments getting confirmed. People that we didn't think were going to get confirmation got confirmation. That's a big topic of discussion. Among the black-pilled right, they're using this success to kind of validate their argument that, well, Trump's sold us out, and this is all a big giant stab in the back, and we're all getting tricked. I can't allow myself to get that jaded and that black-pilled. I just can't. I have an optimistic streak in me, and I just can't accept that everything is controlled opposition and the elites are just controlling all of us. You know, if that's the case, what are we doing this for? Just ignore it and eat the steak. Okay? If you can't fight it and it's all just a game because everything's controlled, then why subject yourself to the stress? Just give up. Okay? Just disconnect and go live in a foreign country on a beach somewhere. I mean, at least you'll die with a frosty beverage in your hand. Okay, one of those little umbrellas. I just can't fall down that hole. Now, that being said, we do need to be careful and recognize the fact that we are living in a dystopian environment. We have to call attention to that and to the things that we see going on and point out those negative sides so that we're at least keeping the negatives in consideration. Okay, aware of how bad things are. I certainly agree with that. We do have to do that. One of the areas of dystopia that we're currently experiencing is the drone war in Ukraine. I believe that this war is coming to an end. It's been another big topic for this week. I think it's probably going to end within the next 3 to 4 weeks. At least that end will begin to go into place, if I'm making sense there. I think there will be a negotiated ceasefire deal between the Russians and the U.S., Trump and Putin, and that will mean at least a temporary pause, because we're going to cut the money off to Ukraine, is what that's boiling down to. But we'll have to wait and see what the EU is doing. Do they have the nuggets to try and go it alone against Putin and continue to support Ukraine, or to try and insist that they be allowed to make up a force of peacekeepers? And none of that is going to fly. I think that's something that the EU has been sort of floating out there, and Putin has already made it very clear that he's not going to accept EU troops openly in Ukraine. And one of the stipulations of any deal that I think he's put into place is going to be a replacement of the government of Ukraine. I think that's why we've seen this week the president come out and be extremely critical of Zelensky and essentially he called him a dictator. He's there well beyond the mandate of his election, and so he's kind of acting as a false leader there. The irony being that the left just loved Zelensky and called Trump a dictator, and that he was going to try to subvert the election and stay in power, and at the same time they're patting this guy on the back when that's exactly what he's doing. But anyway, I think we are going to see some manner of DMZ between Ukraine and the territory that Russia has taken, and it'll be patrolled by some kind of peacekeeping force, probably foreign troops from, Africa, India, China, some other place. It's not going to be British and French and Germans, that's for sure. So what does that leave us with? At least 1 million dead, likely twice that wounded. A vast swath of land that is a wasteland scattered with poisonous materials and unexploded ordnance that's going to take years to clean up and bring back to any kind of usable levels. And more importantly, at least from our perspective, we're not the ones there directly suffering. So for us, the important thing is a lot of lessons about the future of war and conflict and what it all means. And rest assured that people are actually learning those lessons and they're drawing conclusions from them, although oftentimes they're drawing the wrong conclusions and they prove to be incorrect. They are learning. What I want to start the topic of the day with is to ask a couple of questions, or at least discuss the state of the art of combat. And this is a discussion that's getting brought up around the blogosphere from some really smart guys with more chops than I have. Something I am seeing, however, is a conclusion that is generally agreed upon by these speakers, but is something that I disagree with, and I'm going to tell you why. I have a different take on this, but let me throw out some caveats first, because as I said, these guys have way more smarts and mileage than I do, so I could be totally wrong, and they have the real measure of it. I do have some experience here, however, some knowledge. I've closely followed this conflict, pretty well studied the material. I've closely followed the UAS industry, which has led me to draw some conclusions that I might be able to voice later on. And I've actually trained in a tactical environment where the other side had drones and where my side had drones. So I do have a little bit of the perspective of being underneath one of those things that's looking for you in the middle of the woods. So I got a small amount of knowledge on this topic. I don't want to oversell it, but I do have a little bit. And then now that I'm done self-depreciating, let's get into it. The position that has been put forward by some luminaries in the right-wing blogosphere, like Bill Boopert and Matt Bracken, a few others, they assert that the days of the infantry grunt are over. Drones are far too numerous and capable, and it means that infantrymen can't operate and achieve any kind of meaningful goals on the modern battlefield. Well, I disagree with that. And I think history will back me up on this. Let's go back prior to World War I. Late 1800s, Hiram Maxim wants to invent a weapon that will make war a thing of the past because it will make the infantrymen incapable of operating on the battlefield. So what does he do? He invents the water-cooled machine gun. Soon every army, paramilitary organization, whatever, you name it, they had to have one. And they did. And we go into World War I, and machine guns dominate trench warfare. It's devastating. And along with other weapons, it does indeed make the lifespan of the average infantryman very, very short. But then, however, along comes a counter to that so-called war-ending weapon in the tank. And we go on to have 100 years of additional wars and numerous other major weapon advancements and counters. And I think you kind of get the point there. Every time a weapon comes out, a counter to it is not very far behind. Now maybe I'm being too harsh on those men that I mentioned earlier. Real smart guys, like I said. Maybe they are allowing for other advancements to come along that will prove them wrong, but I got a show to do, so let's assume that they're being totally stark in their predictions, and I will lay out my counter offers. I don't believe that the days of the infantry are over. I do believe that the days of the tank as we know it are over. It's done. It can't survive as they are currently built and put onto the battlefield. I think the days of what we have come to think of as combined arms warfare are over. There are a lot of ifs and buts kind of attached to those statements, but let's keep persevering here. Can the infantryman survive on the modern battlefield? And the short answer to that is yes. Why do I say that? Because they are. Okay, this war in Ukraine has been going on for 3 years. and we will have thousands of men who come home when it's declared over. Russia, and to their credit, the Ukrainians, have been achieving small but real territorial gains, even while drones and other UAS systems are becoming more and more prominent. Ukraine's advancements have not been as deep or as productive, I guess, as the Russians, but they managed to drive an offense into Russia proper. And they kept that salient open for quite some time. As far as I know, it's still somewhat of a position for them. And the effects of that are debatable on a political level, but, on the ground, it was a real offensive, and it did achieve some goal. So clearly, infantry are still operating and doing their jobs. And maybe down the road, as the drone weapons advance, that balance is going to change. But again, when weapons get developed, counters come along. Now, the infantry world is very bleak and dark, but I think it's still survivable, and I think it's going to still be survivable. Because they're learning. They're learning the lessons that combat teaches, and the survivors are passing that information on to the next group of replacements and to the guys in the back, in the rear, who take those lessons and they begin to change the way things are done and how things are implemented. The early war demonstrated something, that these soldiers on both sides were absolutely horrible at camouflaging their positions. They dug these trenches and pillboxes and all of these things, and they would conceal those, and then they would promptly begin to toss all manner of garbage all over the place around these positions. So it did them no good. And flying a drone at 1,000 feet, you can watch the videos showing how easy it is to spot them just from that garbage. And disaster and consequences would follow that. Now what I see on videos, the most recent things that I see, much more attention is being paid to keeping the trash cleaned up and hidden. The troops move when they need to, but they stay hunkered down when they're not moving and hidden. They're better on their light discipline and their signal discipline and all, with exceptions, of course. You're going to find examples of that not happening, but they're learning those lessons. And what we're also seeing is numerous counter UAS systems being put into place. Electronic warfare is being pushed down to the lowest level. The smallest unit is carrying some kind of counter drone system or a detection type system that they can pick up and know that when those drones are out there. There's simple low-tech solutions like nets and wires that are being used to provide some standoff, so that when those FPV drones hit those nets and explode, there's some distance there between you and that explosion. It's not as lethal, not as big of a problem. The Russians have even lined some of their supply routes, these roads, with tunnels of nets to drive through to protect these vehicles. So more and more systems are coming online to counter that threat. And if you follow the industry, there's even more in the pipeline. Very simple, very rugged, man-portable, small systems that can be put out there. Now, living or surviving is one thing, but being effective in achieving goals and objectives is another. And war is about territory, or the enforcement of will, at least. And sometimes those are the same thing. But so can infantry still enforce their will upon the other guys? And yes, I think they can. However, it looks different than you might be accustomed to, and very different than what I think the gentlemen who have been talking about this stuff, certainly very different than what they are probably accustomed to. It's smaller, it's dispersed, it's decentralized, it's distributed command and control. The war looks like an insurgency operation, but it's not against insurgents. It looks like a gang war between small groups all over the place at the same simultaneously for little small patches of territory. And overriding all of that is a leadership layer that cannot make these vast sweeping operational plans. They can't mass forces and reserves to achieve those things. So they don't. They can't direct the fight even from a forward position because it's a fight at the buddy team level. So that command and control looks very different. Really, they are relegated to the role of directing support to the areas with the most need or most likely areas of success. They route logistics and medical and replacements to areas that are needed. And they keep a small reaction force that they can direct to an area that maybe makes an advancement or a gain or maybe loses its foothold. They can come in as a QRF to fix that or take advantage of it. And you can tell why that would be a problem or a shock to leadership in big armies. It's something that they're completely unaccustomed to. I don't think Western armies particularly are really prepared for that level of light infantry operations. So I think the opposite here. I don't think the days of the infantrymen are over. I think the future war is a low-level light infantry fight. You don't have armor. You don't have massed artillery. There's no sweeping big maneuver actions. It's small dispersed groups of infantry that are now wearing more hats than they used to. They're not going to be weapons platoons and mortar platoons and scout platoons and all these kind of specialized roles. It's all going to be contained within that small unit. They're going to have to do all of those things on their own, or organically and independently. Within your small platoon, you're going to have all of that capability and responsibility rolled onto you. The squad leader is going to function like a platoon leader. And he's going to be hundreds of yards, maybe further from his platoon leader, who's functioning like a company commander. And his squad is going to coordinate and plan and conduct assaults or defenses, whatever they're doing, all on their own. They'll have information from ISR platforms and first-hand recon that their teams do, and their platoon leader will be there to support them with indirect fire. They're still going to have their own indirect and direct fire capabilities as well, but now that's going to include UAS systems that they maybe didn't have before. And I believe that those UAS systems will be, they may be a new name, UGS systems as well, so unmanned ground systems. Ukraine has already conducted an entirely unmanned vehicle assault on a position using drones in the air and remote unmanned ground vehicles. They now routinely supply their units with unmanned ground vehicles that are carrying supplies. They're about the size of a large ATV that you might have ridden on to go hunting or something like that, and they've got a cargo bed on them. And they carry supplies up to the front lines. And the arms industry has already put together armed versions of those systems. They're being developed. They're being tested. In fact, the U.S. Army here just recently conducted a tactical evaluation of several systems during a large exercise with, kind of mixed results from what I saw. They liked some of them and they didn't like others, but those things are already in the pipeline coming down. So I think what you will see are groups of unmanned vehicles that are controlled or guided by a single manned unit, like one vehicle that's maybe larger with 3 or 4 guys in it, and they're controlling 5 or 6 unmanned vehicles kind of out in front of them, like a little wingman. And they're going to be there to support those infantry groups and kind of act as that traditional armor role or cavalry role, if you will. Bottom line, I think the demise of the infantrymen is being over-exaggerated. Now, the other thing I will say about the arms industry is I think that one of the things that we are seeing is a lot of people that cannot articulate what that future battlefield is going to look like. They don't really have a vision of it. They don't really know. And so what they're doing is they're building systems that maybe meet requirements that are just a guess. And they might be based off of some information coming out of Ukraine, but there's a lot of assumptions that are going into that as well. Well, we wouldn't do it this way, so we don't need to pay attention to that lesson. This is how we would do it, so this is the requirement that we need. And so, that's the MIC being the MIC, and so there's going to be a lot of waste and a lot of companies that throw out designs that eventually get trashed or can't meet the requirements and don't really do the job that they are purchased for. Maybe Doge can have some impact on that and kind of keep that to a minimum. But I think it is really about articulating a vision of what you think the battlefield and the battle space is going to look like. I just don't see a whole lot of people doing that. Anyway, I would like to continue the show today, but I do have some things to do, so maybe we'll come back to this topic, or maybe I can continue the conversation online, maybe get some of those fellows that I mentioned earlier involved in it. But as it is, that is all I have time for today. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab, Nice Crew, and the Cold Fury blog, and I will see you on the next episode.